Number 5. The bassano vase. When we think of cursed objects, we start to go through the classics, you know, haunted dolls, haunted paintings, even the old haunted diamond. You don't tend to think of haunted glassware. Well, let the bassano vase introduce itself. A seemingly unassuming piece of home decor, this sinister flower pot carries with it a deadly curse and legacy. First crafted in the 15th century, the bassano vase was given to a bride as a wedding gift in Napoli, Italy. The day of the wedding, the husband couldn't find his betrothed anywhere. Upon returning home, he found her on the floor, clutching the vase. After her funeral, the vase was given out to one of her family members, who then fell ill within days and had passed away. Of course, no one assumed the vase had anything to do with it, why would it? Despite a suspicious trail already starting to form. The third person to inherit the vase also ended up passing away mysteriously. Well, after the third mysterious death in months, the family contacted a local priest for advice on their situation. And he gave them some reasonable advice. Bury it on hallowed grounds, where no one would find it again. It lay dormant until it was dug up in 1988 by an amateur antique hunter, who sold the vase off quickly, restarting the treacherous cycle where it traveled once again, ending lives mysteriously and ruining an otherwise nicely decorated living room. After its revival, it was brought to the attention of local police. They tried to pass it off to museums or cultural sites, but understandably, no one wanted anything to do with the wretched pot. So with nowhere else to turn, legend goes that the police returned it where it had once been found, buried deep beneath hallowed ground. Hopefully a little bit deeper this time, maybe in a lockbox with 3 padlocks and throw away the keys into the ocean. You know, just to be safe. Are you enjoying yourself, my little ghouls and goblins? Click the subscribe button down below for daily frights from Top 5 Scary.
Number 4 on this list is the screaming skull. Last I checked, if there is no meat on the bone, then a skull shouldn't be screaming. That's kind of what's going down with this one extremely haunted skull in Burton Agnes Hall, England. Instablog says, what if you touch an object and then you hear terrible, deafening screams? That is precisely what happens when you touch this skull at an Elizabethan manor in England. Burton Agnes Hall is the house of Catherine Ann Griffith, who was brutally murdered by numerous bullies in 1620. Her skull still rests inside the house. Why? Because whenever somebody tried to take it out of the house, what happened next terrified them to the bone. People who have tried to touch or disturb that skull have reported seeing a scary ghost walk in and utter a deafening scream. This scared the people so much that they actually ran out of the house in terror. If you're up for a scary challenge, then this might be your chance to prove your mettle to the world, but for the weak-hearted ones, it's wise to stay away. And yeah, guys, I mean, I agree with that article right there. Probably best not to mess with this thing. I mean, a bunch of paranormal investigators won't even go here anymore. If a bunch of paranormal investigators think that this area is too scary for them, then sorry guys, I'm tapping out. It's way too scary for me too. Number 3 on this list is the Maori warrior masks. Now these warrior masks hold a curse that won't affect everyone, just a small portion of people. Specifically, women who are soon to be expecting children. The Occult Museum says New Zealand's Maori warriors are part of an ancient tribe who would carve unique masks when it was time for battle. When a man died in the mask, it was believed that his soul would remain trapped in the mask they were wearing. Although their mythology does not dictate that any harm is done by the trapped souls, the presence of the masks has a strange and sometimes fatal effect on pregnant women. Women who are expecting often experience complications when they come in contact with the masks. It's unknown why this phenomenon occurs, but the museum that holds the remaining masks posts a warning that pregnant women should stay away. The literal museum is out here warning pregnant women not to come. That's how you know that this thing's seriously dangerous. Like whenever a business or enterprise does something that's actually gonna lose them money, that's when you have my attention. Considering they just lost an entire demographic of people, I'm now listening and buying into this curse. The paranormal investigators who aren't pregnant have taken a look at this, and they're having a hard time getting to the bottom of it. Some people have suggested that the Maori tribe thought that pregnant women were taboo, but that also doesn't really make any sense, because then how would they have repopulated their tribe? regardless of why it is the way that it is, just know that if you are expecting, that's not the right time to take a look at these masks. Number 2 on this list is the Surrey ghost car. So this is a weird one and definitely something that paranormal investigators are a bit spooked by. List 25 says crashes are common on the A3 highway in England, so it looked like a routine matter when police in Surrey received calls that a car had veered off the A3 with its headlights blazing. But when officers went to investigate, they found no signs of the reported vehicle. However, a further search revealed chilling results. Just 60 feet from the reported crash scene, and buried in twisted undergrowth, was the remains of a wrecked car containing a decomposing body of a young man who, as the police estimated, had crashed there 5 months earlier. Therefore, what the witnesses reported might have been a ghostly apparition of the original car. Now, how on earth does that make any sense at all? You know what, let me answer that for you. It doesn't. First off, how did no one notice this car earlier? And then, what was that ghostly apparition that had a car veer off the road? Paranormal investigators are all scared of this one because who knows what type of effect this ghost car could have on your vehicle. And finally, number 1 on this list is the cursed mirror. This mirror isn't just cursed with a bad reflection, it's gonna show you something a lot worse than just you with a little bedhead or something. Instablog says, if you've seen Oculus, then chances are already you're scared of mirrors. And let's not even go back to the time when Bloody Mary was a whole thing. But if these creepy images of mirrors in the horror genre weren't enough, here's a real object which is most likely cursed. In St. Francisville, Louisiana, there's a plantation house which is one of the most haunted houses in America. Inside the house is this mirror, a cursed mirror. Legend goes that the plantation slave brutally killed the owner of the house, named Sarah Woodruff, and her daughters inside the house. Ever since then, they remain trapped inside the mirror. Visitors often report sights of handprints on the mirror, along with some unexplainable strange marks. And the classic haunting is also rumored, figures dressed in white, old-fashioned attire, visible on the other side of the mirror. Some people who have been exposed to this mirror for longer than they should say that these figures in white follow them around too, that they've even seen them appear in other mirrors outside of the plantation, and 1 or 2 of them have talked about how they've seen them outside of a mirror entirely, as if they were standing like right in front of them. It seems like the longer that you're exposed to this, the more of an impact the curse will have on you. Kind of like, I don't know, radiation poisoning or something like that, where the time you spend among the toxin, that's gonna hurt you more. Obviously, because of this, paranormal investigators don't want to spend too long investigating this mirror. A short stint doing some research probably won't hurt you, although it will definitely give you a scare considering you're gonna see the figures on the other side. But extended exposure is where the real danger lies with this cursed item.
Coming in at number 5, we have the Tallman family's bunk beds. So the item itself doesn't sound very scary because it's just a bunk bed, but it was the source of intense terror and trauma for the Tallman family. In 1987, Ali and Debbie Tallman bought a bunk bed from a secondhand store and brought it to their home in Horicon, Wisconsin. They stored the bed in the basement until one day they decided to move it upstairs. From the moment someone slept in the bed, an evil entity was unleashed into their home and all hell broke loose. Their children, who were usually healthy, began falling sick for no apparent reason. The radio in the bedroom with the haunted bunk bed would turn on. The kids reported seeing a menacing old woman with long black hair and a fiery glow. Doors slammed open and they heard disembodied voices from empty rooms. Strange paranormal occurrences were running rampant. As the haunting intensified, the Tallmans enlisted their pastor for help with the dire situation. The pastor said that he felt the presence of evil and blessed their home. This was to no avail, and the Tallmans unfortunately continued to be tormented. In a fit of frustration, Alan shouted at the entity to pick on him and not his children. Challenge accepted because shortly after he witnessed the orange glow of fire inside his garage with red eyes staring at him through the window. Then one night while sleeping in the kids' room to protect them, a fog manifested out of the floor. It morphed into flames with green eyes and a voice spoke out of it telling him him, you're dead. Enough was enough and the Tallmans fled their home. The bunk bed was then buried in a landfill so no one would have to go through what the Tallman family did. The house still stands today and reports of paranormal activity ceased once the bunk bed was removed.
Number 4. The Iceman. The Iceman cometh for us all. In 1991, on the peak of the Ozzol Alps in Italy, a pair of mountaineering tourists came across what they thought was a deceased hiker, which in a grandiose sense was kind of true. Not a recent passing, however, because the Iceman in question was dated from 3000 BC. The nature of his passing is unknown, so the criminal could still be out there at large. A fascinating find for the scientific community. The Iceman, nicknamed Otzi after the mountain he was found in, shined a light on history previously unseen. Otzi was the oldest body ever discovered with tattoos. History's first bad boy, if you will. After being unearthed, the body was brought to Austria to be studied intensively, but nothing the researchers discovered could have prepared them for the curse that they had unearthed. A worrying amount of people involved in the study of the Iceman found themselves befelled to an ancient unearthed evil. The first man to discover Otzi, one of the hikers, fell off a path on a mountain to his doom. A mountaineer passed in an avalanche. A forensic pathologist was involved in a lethal car accident en route to give a speech at a university about the Iceman. In total, 7 researchers involved in the study of the Iceman and observers found themselves losing their life after meeting him. So where is the Iceman now? Hopefully supervised? Well, Otzi is currently being held in the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology down in the bottom of Italy, where he is kept in a climate-controlled environment to maintain his preservation. Locked away, visitors are permitted to come see the Iceman, but only through a frozen thick glass window. Is that room to keep him cool and preserved? Or is it to keep whatever curse lay dormant inside his bones docile? All we know is that we're thankful that Otzi's just chillin'. Number 3. The Woman of Lem. Now, modern art can be a bit confusing. It's hard to understand an artist's true meaning behind their work, especially when things start to get abstract. Looking at the Woman from Lem statue, it's hard to even make out what this is supposed to be. A fertility statue? Primitive bog roll holder? You wouldn't even know just by looking at it just how lethally cursed this statue is. We don't know who crafted this or why, but we do know that under no circumstances whatsoever should you ever touch the Woman of Lem statue, lest you're looking to incur the wrath of a centuries-old evil. The statue was first uncovered in 1878 in Lem, Cyprus, giving the statue its name. Carbon dating suggests the statue was formed around 3000 BC. Hey, wait a minute. Do you think Otzi the Iceman ever saw this statue? You think maybe it's the same curse? Was life just significantly more cursed back then? Now back on hand to the topic. Once the statue was found, it began to wreak havoc almost immediately. Legend says 4 families are purported to have lost someone after touching the statue. The first owner, one Lord Elfont, a lord during Cyprus's time as a colony, lost 7 members of his family after acquiring the statue. Sometime afterwards, the next lord to acquire it, Ivor Minucci, obtained the statue and lost his entire family in the span of 4 years. The next victim, one Lord Thompson Knoll, just like the others, his family passed away within 4 years. The stories say that eventually, his remaining surviving sons, understanding that they had a responsibility to rid themselves of this generational evil, gave the statue off to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh for safekeeping, or maybe just to pass the curse along like a vicious cycle of regifting. Within a year, the museum curator passed away mysteriously. Right now, it's still kept there, locked away behind a glass box, never to be touched again by human hands. Let's try and keep it that way. Number 2, the Hope Diamond. Now the Hope Diamond has shown up a few times on this channel before, and for good reason. It's considered one of the most haunted objects on the planet. The diamond was first uncovered in India, with reports claiming that the diamond was plucked from the eye of a statue of the goddess Sita, the goddess of beauty and devotion. Legend has it that the first person who ever stole the diamond was attacked by dogs shortly after taking it. From here, the diamond made its way through countless hands, never staying in one pair of hands for too long though. It's said to have been owned by King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who as far as I know, never had anything too bad happen to them. You know, at least nothing worth losing your head over. That's a little history joke for you. Look up the French Revolution, or Assassin's Creed Unity. It's the same thing. Throughout the diamond's storied history, it's been said that just about every owner of the Hope Diamond suffered a horrific fate. 14 confirmed deaths and owners throughout history, and that's only the ones we know of, as there could be countless more. The jeweler who recut the stone into its current form, William Falls, died a ruined man in poverty and hardship after his son Hendrik stole the stone from his father, who would later be prompted to take his own life as repentance for his crime. After passing from owner to owner under grisly circumstances, it finally made its way to Harry Winston, an American jeweler who, possibly making the first smart choice of anyone on this list, thought it better better to play with his odds, and donated the diamond to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in 1958, where it currently resides sealed away to this day. So what happened when it became museum property? Well, the curators of the Smithsonian were thrilled to receive it, and have said that they consider the gem a crown jewel of their diamond collection, and that in all the time it's been in their watch, no one has suffered any ill effects, and if anything, visitors have gone up. Maybe Indiana Jones was right. Maybe it belongs in a museum. Number 1. King Tut. Now, number 1 on our list might be a little bit esoteric. It's the curse of King Tutankhamun. So not quite an object, but worth noting. King Tutankhamun, or King Tut as his close friends like to call him, is arguably the most famous pharaoh of all time. Uncovering his tomb was a landmark moment in Egyptology and archaeology, with his tomb serving as something of a golden goose for archaeologist Howard Carter, who spearheaded the excavation attempts of King Tut's tomb. It took years upon years of concentrated efforts hunting for it, but in 1922, Howard Carter, under the commission of Lord Carnarvon, uncovered the late pharaoh's mighty tomb. Howard Carter, Lord Carnarvon, and their companion Evelyn Beauchamp, the daughter of Carnarvon, were the first people to ever step inside King Tutankhamun's resting place in centuries. Unfortunately, it wouldn't go so well for them. The first victim was Lord Carnarvon. Upon entering the tomb, he was bitten by a mosquito, and mere weeks later, the bite became deeply infected, poisoning his blood, leading to a loss of life. The author of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, upon reading this story in the news, had theorized that there was a curse put in place by the old gods watching over Tutankhamun's tomb. And that's the guy who created Sherlock Holmes, so let's assume he's probably pretty smart and doesn't just jump to conclusions. The next victim, George Gould, was a visitor to the tomb who developed an intense fever shortly after walking through it. Within months, he had passed away. Next was A.C. Mace, a digger on the excavation team, passed from an intense case of pneumonia shortly after his involvement. Howard Carter's secretary, Captain Bethel, was the next victim, passing away 6 years after the unearthing under mysterious circumstances, believed to have been smothered in his sleep. Now, Howard Carter, the original excavationist who helmed the venture, didn't believe anything about the curse, claiming that it was all superstition and coincidence, not fitting an educated man. He complained, however, that after unearthing the tomb, whenever he would visit Egypt, he noticed repeated sightings of jackals, the same type of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead. Which, I've gotta say, if I recently uncovered a legendary pharaoh and interrupted his slumber to plunder his riches for my personal gain, I would probably be a bit wary about seeing a symbol of the god of the dead following me around. 16 years later, Howard Carter would pass away of Hodgkin's disease. Could he have been the last victim of the curse, or did he manage to escape its throes? The king still rests in his tomb in Cairo, where he shall not be disturbed. You're more than welcome to go visit him if you'd like, but please, be respectful.
Number 5 on this list is Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll is one of the most haunted and cursed dolls on the entire planet. Ghosts and Gravestones says the story of Robert the Doll dates back to the early 1900s when a young boy named Eugene Robert Otto was given a one-of-a-kind handmade doll by a servant that worked for his parents in his home. Eugene, who everybody called Gene, named the doll Robert and quickly became attached to his new friend. The home where Eugene lived, now called the Artist's House, is located at 534 Eaton Street and was built between 1890 and 1898. It was here that Eugene was given Robert the Doll and where a friendship that lasted throughout his lifetime and beyond was forged. While he seemed like an ordinary cloth doll, it wasn't long before Robert was involved in strange and somewhat terrifying events. The first hint that something out of the ordinary was happening was one night when Gene, who was only 10 years old, awoke to find Robert the Doll sitting at the end of his bed, staring at him. Moments later, his mother was awakened by his screams for help and the sounds of furniture being overturned in her son's bedroom. Gene cried for help, begging his mother to rescue him. When she was finally able to wrench the locked door open, she saw poor Gene curled up in fear on his bed, his room in shambles, and Robert the Doll sitting at the foot of the bed. And all the child could say was Robert did it. Now, this was the first instance where Robert was acting up, but there have been tons of experiences since then where this doll is just doing things that really shouldn't be doing. He now lives in East Martello, where visitors flock to see him, although it's a bad idea. There are letters and notes all around Robert from people that have come to see him, all begging for Robert's forgiveness. Apparently taking a picture of Robert without his permission will cause him to start to haunt you. This curse has affected hundreds to thousands of people, and they all usually end up coming back to Robert begging for freedom from this curse. At this point, paranormal investigators have learned that messing with Robert really isn't the best idea, and just leaving this doll alone, probably the smartest thing to do.
Coming in at number 4, the bassano vase. Most people wouldn't mind being gifted a vase from Italy, especially one cast from silver in the 15th century, but the bassano vase is said to be extremely haunted and cursed. The vase was apparently gifted to an Italian bride on her wedding night who lived in a small village close to Napoli. Her big day was ruined, however, when she was found dying on the floor with the vase in her hand, swearing to get revenge. The vase was then passed down to people in her family. With each new owner came another mysterious death, so the family locked it away. In 1988, the bassano vase was found with a note inside that read, "Beware, this vase brings death." Ignoring the warning, the vase was then sold at an auction. 3 months later, the new owner was dead. The owner after that died 2 months later. After a string of mysterious deaths, the police decided to bury the vase somewhere no one would find it. It's said to still be hidden away even today. Whether the vase was cursed or it's the angry spirit of the bride, that's up for debate. All I know is that I'm glad this haunted relic is no longer in circulation. Coming in at number 3, Robert the Doll. Residing behind a glass barrier in a Florida museum is Robert the Doll. This little guy is one of the most haunted dolls in the world, and I think we can all agree that he's absolutely terrifying. While his little sailor outfit is cute, his worn and torn face is something only a mother could love. He's so haunted that he's said to cause car accidents, broken bones, divorces, and a plethora of other misfortunes. If you dare disrespect the doll by taking its picture without permission, he will curse you. This is why his exhibit is littered with letters from people begging for forgiveness. But before the century-old doll was combined to a life behind a protective barrier, he belonged to Robert Eugene Otto, who went by the name Gene. Gene's grandfather bought him the doll in Germany, and the pair were inseparable. Strange things started happening. Gene began having full-blown conversations with the doll. Many nights the family would be woken up by his screams, only to find a frightened Gene surrounded by overturned furniture and scattered toys. He insisted that Robert did it. Things would move around the house and stuff would break. Again, Gene insisted that Robert did it. His parents were skeptical but also unnerved by the strange events going on in the house. Even people who passed by the Otto house in Key West, Florida, claimed to see the doll peering out the window at them. Although Robert the Doll is now locked away in a museum, his apparent ability to curse people is still strong as ever. Those brave enough to visit him are urged to be careful, or else they might find themselves cursed by the haunted doll. Coming in at number 2, we have dybbuk box. Known as the most haunted object in the world, this vintage wine cabinet is locked in a glass box at Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum. In fact, you have to be over 18 and sign a waiver just to set eyes on it. In Jewish folklore, a dybbuk is a malicious spirit with the ability to possess living people and use them for evil. These spirits can be trapped inside of a box to prevent this, which is why the dybbuk box is supposedly home to an evil entity. The dybbuk box was listed on eBay several years ago and it became a sensation. The seller, Kevin Manis, claimed to have purchased it from the estate of a woman who survived a World War II concentration camp. The woman's granddaughter, who was absolutely terrified of the box, warned him that her grandmother said it held the spirit of a dybbuk. Following his purchase, Kevin experienced a series of terrifying unexplained events. He would have nightmares of an old hag who would brutally attack him and then wake up covered in bruises. His mother also apparently suffered a stroke after opening the dybbuk box. He decided to get rid of it for obvious reasons, and it eventually ended up in the hands of Zach Bagans for his museum. Museum goers can look at the dybbuk box but can't touch it, and for good reasons. Post Malone did a private tour of the museum with Zach and found himself cursed by the evil spirit. Zach removed the protective glass around the haunted wine cabinet and decided to place his hands directly on it. Post Malone then touched Zach's shoulder, and that's all it took. In less than a month, his private jet was forced to make an emergency landing, his house was broken into by armed robbers, and then he got into a car accident. Safe to say that is one haunted relic that should stay locked away forever. And finally, in at number 1 we have Annabelle. In the number 1 spot is a doll so haunted, so notorious, and so creepy that she's had 3 horror movies made about her. The real Annabelle isn't actually a wide-eyed porcelain doll, but an innocent-looking Raggedy Ann who lives at Ed and Lorraine Warren's occult museum. But don't be fooled by her unassuming look, she's considered extremely haunted and dangerous. So haunted in fact that she permanently resides in a wooden box with a copy of the Lord's Prayer and a label reading, "Warning, positively do not open." In true Hollywood fashion, Annabelle's origin story was altered quite a bit. bit. The real story of Annabelle started with two nurses who lived together as roommates in the 70s, when one was gifted the doll by her mother. Soon after, the girls began noticing that Annabelle would move on her own, finding her sitting in a different position and even in different rooms. The haunting escalated when they found parchment paper with the words "Help me" written in crayon scattered around their place. The girls didn't even own parchment paper. After more unexplained events, they decided to contact a medium who told them that the spirit of a 6 or 7-year-old girl named Annabelle died in the area around their apartment complex and was living inside of the doll. Things only got worse and Annabelle became violent with Lou, a boyfriend of one of the nurses. He claimed to have been strangled by the doll while sleeping and even suffered 7 claw-like slashes on his body after throwing her across the room on a separate occasion. Annabelle is known to be violent with people who dare to taunt her. Ed Warren believes that the doll is responsible for at least one death, that of a museum goer. According to the late paranormal investigator, a young man and his girlfriend visited the occult museum. Stupidly, the man decided to mock Annabelle by tapping on the glass and telling her to scratch him like he scratched Lou. The couple was kicked out and the man died approximately 3 hours later when he lost control of his motorcycle and hit a tree. Although the Raggedy Ann doll is locked away behind a wooden box, complete with the Lord's Prayer, it seems that Annabelle's evil prowess simply cannot be contained.